And we're back. Mike Cernovich, Cernovich.com, with a special guest tonight. You had questions, 500 plus questions alone. My phone's been blowing up, so we're going to have a long, sort of free-ranging conversation with Stephen Bannon tonight. And, I want people to know, as you're listening in, as you're coming in, let people know, be sure to like it, be sure to share it, so that everybody can hear the full story. This isn't going to be, softball. This isn't going to be little gotcha games. This isn't going to be edited stuff. I only believe in live interviews because edited news is fake news. So it looks like we're live. If you're on Periscope, say hi. If you're on YouTube, say hi. If you're on Facebook, say hi. Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. Okay, I'm going to introduce my guest, Mr. Stephen K. Bannon. We'll talk to him for a little bit. We'll take your questions. So welcome to the jungle, Mr. Bannon.
So glad to be on, Mike. Looking forward to this.
That's great. So we had a bunch of questions. I think first, though, we'll talk about what brings you here tonight. You did want to talk about the midterm elections and Trumpet War. So what is Trumpet War and what inspired you to do that film?
Well, listen, in 2010 with Dave Bossie, I made 3 films: Generation Zero, Generation Zero about the financial collapse, Fire from the Heartland about the women of the Tea Party movement, and a film called Battle for America with Dick Morris. And it was to inspire the Tea Party movement. So we went around and showed that film everywhere, starting in August of 2010, and it was one of the elements that led to the victory, because we were there to pump up the grassroots and show them that you could win. And because the grassroots didn't have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And then about 9 months ago, I figured that coming in the closing days, September, October, we were going to need a rally film, a film that could actually inspire the grassroots to get out, have the sense of urgency, that understand that this is a referendum on Donald Trump. This is not about your individual congressman. It's not about voting for a rhino. This is about supporting Trump's program. And we have to offset the energy and the urgency that the left has. And the left has shown a tremendous amount of energy on the grassroots. And you can see around these districts this weekend, they're out everywhere. And we got to match that. We have to match that with just the same level of intensity, the same level of focus. And so I started this thing about 9 months ago. As you know, Mike, it takes a while to make these, given your great film. And, we edited it. I tested it over the summer, and we released it about 8 weeks ago. And so we've been driving. I think it's got over 8 million views as of now. We're trying to get it to 10 million by election day. So it's something we're very focused on.
Yeah, the film's interesting because it covers an issue that a lot of people don't want to talk about, which is the far left-wing violence and the Antifa violence. What inspired you to focus on the real threat that just the average Trump supporter faces?
What inspired me was you. It was during CPAC when you came by and we had this conversation, and you mentioned to me that, I've been following it, but honestly, I hadn't followed it that closely. You mentioned that, hey, one of the things people are getting discouraged about, one of the things people are angry about is this intense violence at these rallies outside beforehand that's not being fully reported. It's being reported on social media, but it's not getting up to mainstream media. So what we did is go back. In the first 5 minutes of this film, if we actually had this film in theaters, I think it would be X-rated or unrated for violence and language, because the first 5 minutes is a prologue. And essentially, you kind of inspired me to go find this footage. And so what we did is take Don Lemon, right? And Don Lemon, on a CNN show, lectures the American people every night. And so we went back and took the footage of Don Lemon, not talking about Trump, but talking about Trump's supporters, saying that it's not Donald Trump that's the racist. It's not Donald Trump that's the nativist or the xenophobe. It's you, the Trump supporter. And then we just went and intercut it with this Antifa footage of beating up people in red ball caps, are beating up innocent people going to Trump rallies. And it's quite jarring. When we tested the film, it really shook people up and got people's attention. And that's how we kind of get into the film. It's like a 5-minute prologue. Then we cut right into the movies. So I want to thank you for the inspiration. And we took a couple of months to go find what we thought was the best and most intense footage of that, and cut it together.
Yeah, it was, again, it shows the problem of the fake news media. I actually talked to a woman who's in Hoax, my movie, and the reason she was actually beat up is because she thought that the people protesting the event she attended, she thought they were just like normal protesters. She's like, oh, hi, I see you're a lefty protester. Let's talk. Let's have a debate. Next thing you know, they're pounding her with a flagpole. So I blame the fake news media actually for a lot of the violence that ordinary people are facing.
Well, you know, some people on the left are even getting it. I had this debate in Toronto on Friday night. There was like 3,500 people at the Symphony Hall, the Thompson Symphony Hall. It's kind of the elite of Toronto, but outside they had like 1,000 protesters, I think. You know, most of them were just general, you know, Canadian protesters. But there was a huge amount of these Antifa, and they rattled these people. They were saying, hey, you're a fascist. You're going to support a fascist. They were taking their pictures. And you could tell a lot of the audience was rattled when the thing started. So here you're seeing some elites or seeing some of the center-left people starting to get a taste. A lot of the folks I heard afterwards were shocked. They had no earthly idea, Mike, that you know the left was this kind of crazy. But they got a taste of they got really a taste of that medicine that night. And I think that's why I hope this film gets a broad distribution, because I want people to see, particularly that first 5 minutes, of how innocent Trump supporters are being really hassled and beat up at these rallies.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to a lot of sort of media people just on background or whatever, and I heard from a couple of them that when they went to that weirdo Unite the Right 2 rally and only 10 or 20 freak shows went, Antifa was cutting the cords, and all these sort of lefty journalists were like, "Wait a minute, they're beating us up now. What is actually going on?" So I think the traditional left, the lefty journals, because you know, one thing, you know, you can share your thoughts. You know, I don't want to turn this into a big disagreement with Trump or whatever, but I think a lot of journalists do try to get it right. I think what they do wrong is they won't call out their fake news counterparts. So the New York Times, for example, if I tweet something they don't like, it's the front page of the news. But if their little buddies at the Huffington Post or another fake news site post something wrong, they just look the other way. So how do you feel about the rhetoric around the media and calling?
Well, I think individually they're fine people. I mean, you look at your 60 Minutes interview or my 60 Minutes interview. You know, if they have to put up all the interview, I think my 60 Minutes when I left the White House, I said, look, as long as it all goes up, I will do anything you want. No rules. You ask any questions. There was I think it was a 3-hour interview that they eventually put up on Charlie Rose's Bloomberg show in like 60 Minutes on 60 Minutes. I think the problem gets to be that they get triggered as a group by just Trump's demeanor. You know, he's not about to back down. You know, he knows he's triggering these folks, and he's not about to back down. I don't even think it's about the policies. I kind of call this, you know, I think it was Ezra Klein called it the signal and the noise. If you look at the signal of what Trump's doing on policies, I'm not even sure that the left media is because they don't engage in the policies that much. They don't really drill down on what this war, economic war with China. They don't really go into the depths of his America First national security policy. They don't talk about the meaning of NAFTA. They don't really talk at any depth of what he's accomplishing and why he's a transformative president. It's all on the surface, and I think the surface noise just triggers. It's like a flashbang grenade every day, and they're triggered. And I think as a group, they've collectively they're almost lost their mind. You see CNN the other day. I was on the campaign trail on, I think it was in Kansas on Thursday or something. I looked down, and I think the top 50 stories on CNN were all different. Trump's a racist, Trump's a nativist, Trump's saying this, Trump's doing this. It's almost so hysterical, right? It's almost to be, you know, detached from the actual reality that's going on. And I think he continues to do that. I would think it's one of the reasons he's dropped the hammer now is he realizes he's identified the opposition party media and the fake news industry as you know, as an opposition to him, and I think he's highlighting it for the American people.
Okay, a question I want to get into though, and before I do it, I want to preface it with a double standard, which is that sort of if you're conservative or on the right, we have to kind of own everything our kooks do, right? So some weirdo sends a message, and one time he liked your Facebook page, the media will say the rhetoric is sort of ratcheting it up. What do you think about some of the stuff I see about the media? You know, I saw a journalist get spit on. I don't like that. You know, let's call them names or whatever and be social, but stuff like that I have a problem with.
Well, listen, I don't think look, I think at the rallies, the CNN sucks and all that. I think that's part of the rallies, and that is not, you know, I think if CNN gets bent out of shape about that, that's just, you know, Zucker and these guys, they give as good as they get. So I don't think it's a problem. Look, nobody wants violence, and we've been, you know, adamant. No, you have been that whatever these groups are that are looking to get it on, right, to get it on and have fights and disrupt things, etc., or cause violence to people is just unacceptable. Look, the country's divided, but I actually think in a certain way that's healthy, and here's what I mean. The progressive left has been out, Trump's triggered them, whether it's the Time's Up movement, whether it's the resistance, whether it's Tom Steyer's Next Generation, or that whole Networks Nations crowd. He's triggered them they got something that the Republican establishment missed. They understand that Trump's transformative. He's a transformative president, a historic figure, and he's going to be right now in their personal lives 10, 20, 30 years from now. And that's more than just changing the federal judiciary. It's what he's doing on deconstructing the administrative state. It's what he's doing on economic policy, national security policy, border policy, eventually education and eventually healthcare policy. So that's why they picked the House of Representatives in November 6th to stop him. And that's why they've been moving with all the urgency and all the intensity the Tea Party movement moved with in 2010. I think that's healthy. I disagree with these people 100% ideologically, but I admire their grit. And that's why on our side, we had that in 16. We had it in the primaries, and we had it in the general campaign. Trump won because of a massive grassroots turnout, Mike, that you know very well. Now, that's what has to happen now. We're going to slug this thing out in about 30 to 35 congressional districts on Tuesday, and it's whoever gets their base out, right? It's whoever wins. That's healthy. And we have two different views of the future of America. I think that's healthy. We're not going to hug this out. We're going to fight it out at the ballot box, doing it the traditional way of canvassing, of getting your neighbors out, of raising money for candidates, et cetera. So I think that is, that's a healthy part of the American experience. We've done this before. What we've got to do is stop this nonsensical violence. And I keep saying the nonsensical violence on the right is magnified because the opposition party media lives to create monsters on the right that I don't think really exist. I happen to think these radicals, these far right fringe groups, are so tiny and so irrelevant as to overwhelm the real message of the populist nationalist movement, which is really a working class and middle class movement in this country that's trying to essentially take the country back from this permanent political class in Washington, D.C. That's a winner. That movement will have 25% of Bernie's people that are economic nationalists. It'll have 1/3 to 40 or 50% of African Americans that understand and agree with Trump's economic policies, and it'll have 1/3 to 40 or 50% of Hispanics. And that governing coalition will be like 1932. And by the way, if there are people out there, these kind of ethno-nationalists that don't like that, they can go fuck themselves. I don't give a shit, right? Because they're irrelevant. What's relevant is building a coalition here of working class people and middle class people that can take the country back. And this is not an ethno-nationalist movement. This is a civic or economic nationalist movement. And it's a winner. It's definitely a winner. You can just see the math. And I know we can get these people back. I know they're giving Trump a hard look right now. They may not vote for Trump this time on November 2006, but a lot of them didn't vote for Hillary Clinton last time. They may take a pass this time, but not support a Democrat. We are certainly we could be very competitive at getting these votes in 2020 and then have a realignment like 1932. That's the entire mission I've been working on for 9 years and, probably work on for another 9 or 10 years.
Well, yeah, what we're seeing is a populist movement with all these sort of niche leaders. So, for example, you have Candace Owens leading Brexit. You have even Beto O'Rourke now trying to run as a left-wing economic populist. You have Tulsi Gabbard. So what happens if the left actually gets smart and they reject this divisive, angry identity politics, and you have Tulsi Gabbard and Beto O'Rourke running in 2020?
Well, hold it. I tell you, and Seth Moulton, here's the thing. This is the debate in Toronto was about on Friday night. For your listeners, the future is populism globally. You can see that in Hungary, in Italy, in what's happening in Europe, and Captain Bolsonaro in Brazil. The future is populism. Here's the only question before us, whether it's going to be populist nationalism as represented by Donald Trump or populist socialism as represented by O'Rourke and Corbyn in England and Bernie Sanders. And here's the difference. Remember, a central plank of the Trump agenda, his three things I laid out in CPAC, economic nationalism, number one, America First, national security is number two, and deconstructing the administrative state. And what that means is taking this massive government bureaucracy, the Leviathan, apart brick by brick. And that's what he's doing. It's much deeper than deregulation. It's actually taking apart these agencies and getting them out of the this kind of nanny state involvement in people's lives. Look, we're not libertarians and we're not anarchists, right? We know we need a healthy state, but you don't need an overweening state. The difference in left-wing populism is that these guys, essentially, the left-wing populist socialism wants more intrusion of your state into your lives, and quite frankly, they are globalists. And that's why, look, there is 1/3, 25% to 1/3 of Bernie's people are economic nationalists. There is nothing that stops us from getting those people in one or two election cycles. Once we have that, and we have 1/3 to 40% of African American working class and middle class that Trump's policies are working for, 1/3 to 40 or 50% of Hispanics, 30 to 50% of the Asian Americans. That coalition of working class people that believe in capitalism but believe in the accountability of capitalism and stop this crony capitalism in Washington D.C. and break the permanent political class like President Trump's trying to do. Once we do that, that's a governing coalition for 50 years. That's why the left's so hysterical. That's why the attacks come. That's why they don't want to debate, Mike. They never want to debate the facts. On Trump's economic numbers on Friday, they don't want to do that. They want to call you a nativist, a racist, a xenophobe, an anti-Semite, a homophobe. And that's why I said in France, when they get to those accusations, they don't want to argue the merits of the policies. Once they get those accusations, wear those accusations as a badge of honor. And here's why. That means you're winning. They're in the cul-de-sac of identity politics. They can't get out of it. They can't build a governing coalition around it. And we can continue to win. And that's why I think this November, on Tuesday, is such an important day for us to keep the driving momentum in this program.
We can win, but something, I don't know, I just want to kind of set this up and talk to you about it, because I had a moment with a Orthodox Trump supporter, and this was about a year and a half ago, and he said to me, he said, Mike, why don't you say more about some of the anti-Semitism that you see? And I go, man, I've talked about it like many times. And he said, I feel like you should or could do more. And by the way, this was a Trump guy. And I said, well, I've been accused of stuff that I'm not, but I've been thinking a lot about that, especially after this psychopath went into the synagogue and shot all these people. Is there more we can do to fight the racism and the anti-Semitism that we see? And
listen, absolutely. It's got to be standard. But let's take an example. They thought Trump was too close to the Jewish people. Look, the bedrock of our movement, and this is people to, I think it through. We're like sedimentary rock. There's different layers and different groupings. First off, the gun owners and the evangelical Christians are a central part of the foundation of the Trump movement. There's nobody that has the back of the Jewish people in the United States and in Europe and in Israel than the evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics. That's just a fact. The reason that the embassies moved to Jerusalem is because the evangelicals had the back of Israel from day one. You will not find a movement. And I tell people, hey, look at Jeremy Corbyn. I don't hear about anti-Semitism. Look at Jeremy Corbyn in Europe and what's happening to the Labour Party in Europe. That's gone beyond anti-Semitism to the starting of the hatred of Jewish people. In fact, the polls show that 50% of British Jewish people would leave Great Britain if Jeremy Corbyn came to power. And if you look at Kristen Gillibrand, you look at Cory Booker, and you look at the check marks they have to give the BDS movement, it is total BS that the right and the populist nationalist movement is anti-Semitic. It's anything but that. And conservative Jewish people are part of this, right? And we're proud of it. That's why at Breitbart and other organizations we've been at the leading edge of stopping this BDS movement, which is insidious. And the Democratic Party is getting to be a check mark in their, as they get more radicalized, as the resistance gets more radicalized. But the people that have the back of the Jewish people in the United States are the evangelical Christian right, the conservative Catholics, and they are a foundational member of the Trump movement. But yes, I think anything, this nutcase that killed these people. First of all, the death penalty to me should be truth. This guy should be put on trial, given a drumhead trial, bang, pull the trigger. There should be. And look, I'm hardcore about these type of incidents, which I think is outrageous that we tolerate. But no, I think people should try to do more to stamp it out. And I know that on the Breitbart comments page, hey, I was lit up all the time as a Catholic and also somebody that supported, stopping the BDS movement, the plight of Jews in Israel, etc. But look, it is free speech. If people want to say that, they can say it. But certainly in our movement, there's no place in our movement, the populist nationalist movement, for anti-Semitism, and anybody that thinks like the term globalists or for Soros. These are not conspiracies. Okay, they're not conspiracies. The party Davos is not a conspiracy. It's not the Illuminati. It's not the Jesuits. It's not the Vatican, right? It's not the Freemasons. It's not the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, right? It's a combination of the scientific, managerial, engineering, financial, cultural class, right, of these major financial institutions, the global corporatists, the law firms, the accounting firms, all of it that are, support these kind of global institutions that destroy and break these individual nation states. And that's what this battle kind of is. It's the nation states versus the globalists. And it's not an anti-Semitic term. And anybody that sits there and whines about that is just incorrect, because it's not a conspiracy. And these are not code words or trigger words that we use.
So you would agree then the Tree of Life attack was terrorism?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. I think the guy is, first off, he's deranged. I mean, the thing is, well, look, he felt Donald Trump and embraced the Jewish people too much. He was adamantly opposed to moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And remember, I was adamant day one that should be something we should do day one. I thought that was a day one event. It turned out to be a day, 250 event or 270 event, but I thought it should be done day one. I thought it was the first act that the president should do after he was inaugurated. I thought he should go back to the White House and move the embassy right there. In fact, we worked on the transition for a host of reasons. I'm sure will come to light one day. It didn't happen then. But if not Ambassador Dermer, President Netanyahu, and the people of Israel, I don't think it would have happened. And so that's why I'm very proud of that moment. But yeah, this guy, you call it terrorism or massacre, whatever you want to call it, he should be, to me, he should be tried, given a fair trial, and then executed, because it's outrageous, and this type of stuff can't happen.
Yeah, one of the things, because that was one of the gotcha questions a lot of people try to pull on me too, is they say, oh, I bet you won't call the Tree of Life thing terrorism. I'm like, sure, it's domestic terrorism. Let's throw him to Gitmo. He can go down to Gitmo as far as I'm concerned. So that's the problem with the media. And
I don't think you ought to go to Gitmo. I think you ought to be tried and executed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I don't know why we'd send that guy to Gitmo. The guy killed 11. They beat up a cop. I think 12 people on Friday night. The Antifa types got arrested in Toronto. And why? They want to get it on with the police, and the police shouldn't have to put up with that. The police don't get paid to put up this nonsense from these punks. They ought to roll these guys up, throw them in the paddy wagon, take them downtown, and let them stew in a cell for a while. And I'm not some authoritarian. I just think that's what we need to get civil society back. And the people that protest get a full right to protest. You do what you want. But as soon as you start getting violent, as soon as you start spitting on cops, that kind of stuff, that to me is where you cross the line. And our law enforcement people shouldn't have to take that.
Well, you mentioned the term populism and nationalism. So the question I get about you all the time, so I would just like to have a great clip that can be on the internet. Is populism white nationalism, and are you a supporter of white nationalism?
I lost you there for a second on thing. No, but listen, this is about civic nationalism, about economic nationalism. Here's the point. Economic nationalism and civic nationalism doesn't care about your race, doesn't care about your color, doesn't care about your religion, doesn't care about your ethnicity, doesn't care about your gender. It doesn't care about your sexual preference. All of that is irrelevant. Here's what it cares about of the United States of America. And if you're a citizen, you're going to get a better deal.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the contagion spread to Wall Street, and the corporate America was called maximization of shareholder value. Everything was focused on the equity holders of these companies, right? Either through LBOs or going private transactions, private equity. I mean, you've talked to venture capitalists, right? Everybody was focused on maximizing shareholder value to the detriment of communities, to the detriment of other stakeholders, to the detriment of labor. It became this fetish, okay? Our whole concept in this populist movement, this nationalist movement, is the maximization of citizenship value. As a citizen of the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, right, you get a special deal, right? And that special deal is you don't have to compete, right, with all over the world with labor that comes at 1/10 the cost, right? We're not going to make you, the purpose is not to make you a 18th century Russian serf. The purpose is to give you a piece of the action. A piece of the action through better trade deals to get you higher wages and high value added manufacturing jobs that will come back here. Or a piece of the action that we break up this kind of state capitalism, this crony capitalism of this consolidation of media companies and pharmaceutical companies and tech companies into these Goliaths that really control the puppets in Washington. So you have a permanent political class that's in bed with state capitalism. That's the beginning of fascism. The system we have today is where people worship the state, and you have these large combines of these companies, and it gets to be the state capitalism. That is what the Trump program, by deconstructing the administrative state, is trying to break up. And that is the power of that. It has nothing to do with ethno-nationalism. Ethno-nationalism, by definition, I think, is a ridiculous theory. Okay, it makes no sense intellectually, it makes no sense morally, and it's just ridiculous. And the mainstream media goes out of their way to get these wingnuts that are out there as ethno-nationalists, and they are wingnuts. And I don't care if they call me 1,000 names. I could give a flying fuck what you call me, okay? I know what I'm working on, and what I'm working on is civic and economic nationalism and of growth, to make the sovereign United States a unit of growth, and to bring, and you can see it in Trump's numbers. Look at Friday. Manufacturing jobs are coming back. Wages are rising. African-American unemployment, all-time low. Hispanic unemployment, I think, a 30-year low. The lowest unemployment overall since 1969. Wages are finally starting to rise, I think, over 3%. Manufacturing jobs are coming back at an explosion. Trump's program is working. That's what we have to have his back. We have to drive this program forward. And our movement has no use for and no room for ethno-nationalists. If they have a problem with that, they can go fuck themselves. I don't give a shit, right? I just don't. I don't have time for it. I just don't have time for it. And so if they're going to get all, their heads blown up, let them blow their fucking heads up. I don't give a shit. There has no room for them. We've never had any room for them. And what the left does is they use those cranks, and they are cranks. They use those cranks to try to stop, which is a movement that is going to take political power in this country, and we're going to run this country for 50 years.
Now, what's going to be done about student loans? Because that we have a generation of people in indentured servitude, and I think that anybody not talking about student loans is missing the issue, and I'm not hearing anybody on the right or any so-called conservative talking about this issue.
You okay, nailed it. Okay, let me step back for a second.
Student loans, yeah.
Okay, so the real Russian serfs are the millennials. And I believe that the millennials are a major target for us to bring them on board. And here's why. The millennials are better fed, they're better clothed, they're in better shape, they have more access to information than any generation in history. They're also like 19th century Russian serfs. They don't own anything, and they're not going to own anything. Since the financial collapse of 2008, what the elites did is basically flood the zone with capital. It took the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve under Obama from $880 billion to $4.5 trillion. And I'm not blaming President Obama for that. Bush and his Bush regime and the guys on Wall Street and the Democrats led to that financial debacle. But Obama kept flooding the zone to now the Federal Reserve balance sheet's $4.5 trillion. What they did is lifted up all the asset holders. If you own big things of real estate or intellectual property or stocks, your hedge fund, you got bailed out. What it did on the reverse side is your savings account is zero. The pension funds have the biggest gap ever. You can't do a bond offering for a school district to fix the ceilings because the yield's only 1%. Nobody will buy the bonds. What it also did in driving those asset classes up, it made real estate, you can't, if you're a millennial, you can't get a place to live. If you live in the Bay Area or other places around the country, you can't own anything. You can't own a house. You can't get a stake in the system. You're just a little hamster you're on the wheel of debt the entire time. Okay? And over your head, you have $1.5 trillion of student debt. And yet the entire time they're bringing in more labor, particularly I think it's 3 million green cards a year given for high technology and high value added jobs in the education system. Look, I have no problem with foreigners. What I have a problem with is we have an entire generation that's now stuck in a gig economy. There's a report the other day, Mike, that millennials right now in this stage of life are 20% below income their parents are. And the spread's only going to get bigger. We've eviscerated a generation over 50 years old, the financial collapse. We have crushed the millennials. And this is one of the problems you have with family formation. The number one reason we don't have family formation and people getting married and having more kids, the answer is always the same: economic anxiety, economic angst. Well, this is not going to magically go away. We have to go in and fix the student debt problem. We have to fix this housing problem, right? This is the availability of housing. It's, to me, those policies going forward that are going to be very populist. And look, we're on my at my not-for-profit, the Citizens American Public, we're now starting to do some think tank stuff and analysis. Like, for instance, why is rent not written off like a mortgage payment, right? What can you do to start to end this unaffordability of houses? What about no taxes for under $100,000? Now, these are not policies I'm putting forward today because we haven't thought them through enough. But we're looking at these populist policies that would be attractive millennials. Millennials are going to make up 50% of the populist movement going forward because I think they realize they've been screwed by the system.
Well, in my view, too, that's why the left focuses on identity politics because I got out of politics completely because I saw that John McCain suspended his campaign, as did Obama, so that they could figure out how they were going to make it so that Goldman Sachs could give out record bonuses. And I don't hear anybody talking about any issue other than divide and conquer, social justice issues on both sides. But I'm frustrated, Steve, and I'll tell you why. I don't hear conservatives talking about student loan debt. I don't hear people on the so-called right talking about student loan debt. So what basically the hell is wrong with people?
Well, you don't. Here's why. Because you've had, remember, Trump's movement, this kind of populist nationalist movement, is now, we're at the very early stages of this, Mike. I mean, President Trump came on and took this movement 10 years to where it was. My point is, a lot of these policies you don't hear being talked about by Republicans because they're not Republican policies, right? They fall into a lot of the problems of the establishment Republicans. They fall into the primitive political class. And listen, it was the Bush and Obama administration, the uniparty combined, that bailed out Wall Street. You know, we have socialism in this country for the very wealthy, and we have socialism for the very poor. And what I mean by that, we have spent trillions of dollars bailing out the banks, bailing out the hedge funds. Not one corporate CEO went on trial for the financial collapse of 2008. Not one share of stock was taken away. Not one bonus was ultimately missed. They missed it for the first year. And to your point, when they came back for those meetings, what did they do? They allowed Goldman Sachs, my previous firm that I worked at, Goldman Sachs become a bank holding company. What does that mean? With one stroke of a pen, they borrow from the Federal Reserve essentially zero and lend to their own clients for a couple of hundred basis points to make a couple of $1 billion a year, right? You didn't get that bailout. The working class didn't get the bailout. The deplorables didn't get that bailout. And the middle class didn't get that bailout. The burdens on their shoulders to pay for it, years of the Judeo-Christian West, okay, has been built upon the concept of the family and the husbanding of resources and saving and being prudent. We've destroyed that in 10 years. If you have a savings account and you're listening to this show right now, you're a sucker, okay? If you save me, you're a complete palooka, okay? Because it costs you money to keep the savings account open. Why is that? That's the reverse of zero interest rates. That's the wealthy bailing themselves out. If you've owned assets for the last 10 years, stocks, hedge funds, you've owned big holdings of real estate, intellectual property, name it. You've had the greatest 12-year run in human history. If you're a working stiff, you're just on, the average American family, I think, or 40% of the American families can't put their hands on $400 in cash. The average cash you have in the bank or the net worth you have, the equity in your house is like $10,000. There's no pension funds today. There's nothing for the future today. This economic anxiety we reach through all of security. Most of your listeners, as hardworking and successful they are 2 paychecks away from oblivion, right? And particularly as you get older. This is not what the founders had in mind. This country is huge in resources, in people, in technology. And the question has to be, how have we gotten this concentration of wealth and power? In the deplorables, it's on their shoulders the whole civic society rests. How is it? People ask all the time, like, Bannon, why are you so angry and why are these deplorables so angry? I say, hey, they're rational human beings. They understand the whole thing rests on their shoulders. The military, the cops, the civic society, plus they pay all the taxes. And all they do is get stiffed and dismissed by this elite. And remember this, the elite is both corrupt and they're incompetent. Okay? If they were just corrupt and competent, you could probably give them a pass. But they make so many massive fundamental mistakes that have been about destroying this country and particularly destroying our greatest resource. And the greatest resource this country has is not its natural resources, as great as it is and as beautiful as this country is. It's not our Constitution and our documents, which are fantastic, and I do believe divinely inspired. The best thing we have is the deplorables, is this backbone of our civic society, which is the working class and middle class in our country, that has gotten us through the Revolution. It got us through the Civil War. It got us through the Great Depression of World War II. And upon its shoulders, that's what Donald Trump rose up on, the shoulders of the deplorables. It will get us through this next crisis, which I think we're starting to get in the middle of, and the deplorables will get us through it.
Well, what about healthcare then? Healthcare, is that a right, pre-existing condition?
Lower level white collar job, but this was with no college, but these were good paying jobs that you could afford to have. My mom stayed at home. We had 5 kids, kind of typical Irish Catholic family. But we had the ability to have these great benefits. I still think that's the best way to do it, to get high value added manufacturing jobs. If that's not the total solution, I believe that Lindsey Graham and what Dr. Kennedy in the Senate and Rick Santorum came up with that we never got through Mitch McConnell was this concept of devolving that back to the states, just like they did the welfare system in the 90s. You have to put some more money into the system. You can't do all the cuts on taxes and the capital gains. It's going to be a little more expensive first, but you let the states be laboratories for this and figure it out. I just think Bernie's program and these guys' program, the Medicare for All, it's just impractical. You just can't figure out how to finance it, right? Even if you wanted to do it, you can't figure out how to do it. And we have to stay away from government intervention, because once you get into the government, you're going to get to the British system or the Canadian system, which I think are total disasters.
Well, that's the thing, though. What would we do? Because I liked your debate with Fromm, and it shows why nobody's prepared to have these conversations. Things that I had said for years. 50% of people are a paycheck away from disaster, a car wreck, a medical emergency. 50% of the population couldn't raise $1,000 in a week. And these are huge problems. But what would a healthcare system look like? What would a populist healthcare system look like? What would we do? For example, I always tell people, most people are over medicalized. So you have a cut or something, a nurse practitioner could handle that. So are there free market solutions that could be put into play that could lower healthcare costs?
Look, I think there are. I'm the last person to ask about this because I'm not a medical expert. But the guys I respect, the men and women that are respecting this, I think they've got a whole raft of things, and people can make different decisions about that, right? I think we have to, make sure you get insurance across state lines. But I still think that the best way to do it is devolve it back to the states and let the states be the laboratories for this. I think we'll see amazing innovation across in different states. And that is, as those types of products and those types of systems come up through the capitalist system of trial and error, I think that will be, and I think we have to avoid, I think the big fight now is to avoid the single payer, or where you see the left is driving towards this kind of single payer system. I think that is a huge mistake. And I do believe this goes much deeper than health insurance. I know health insurance is the big Obamacare fight. I think it's going to be next to what you're saying, is that what are different, degrees of what you take, how you pay for it. I still think the key point to drive this is start to bring high value added manufacturing jobs back here. Once you do that, you're going to have companies that can afford to, and we should demand, and the unions and others should demand, they start paying better benefits. And I think that's a basic right of workers in these companies. So I think I see a lot of positiveness out there, but I got to tell you, if we lose the House and you start losing these elections, because it's all about victory, they're going to drive single payer. And I've just looked at the math. I don't see how you even get close to paying for single payer and paying for what Bernie wants, Medicare for all. And I heard Ms. Cortez talk about, well, maybe you do something with funerals. I don't think that when I see numbers of $33 trillion, I don't think that that's the solution.
Well, so I'm pro-union, and I can say that because I don't run for any kind of elected office. What's your take on unions?
Well, I come from a union family. I come from a Democratic union family. Look, I think trade unions and unions are public unions. I think are totally unacceptable. I think they've gotten out of control. I don't know why we have governments that have. I just don't think they should have unions. I don't think government workers should be unionized. I believe that from the beginning. I think it just drives up government costs. That stuff should either be contracted out, or people have to work. It shouldn't be unionized. Now, for police and firemen, and then for private industry, I come from a union family. That being said, right, it's a trade-off. Unions, part of the inefficiency and lack of productivity came from certain union rules in the 60s and 70s. That's one of the things that drove manufacturing offshore. And bringing manufacturing back, there's got to be some enlightened, form of capitalism here between management and labor. And we have to understand, particularly these advances in technology, right? We got to protect workers. We definitely have to protect jobs. I'm a big name of protectionism. I just am. And people say, oh, you're not a free trader. I go, the free trade's a radical idea. I don't need to hear some professor tell me, because these guys have all wanted to be free trade on the backs of workers when we're up against a totalitarian mercantilist system, and that's China. China is at economic war with us. They're totalitarian. The Chinese people are fantastic, okay? And the country of China is great. It is the Communist Party, the CCP, that are totalitarian and run a mercantilist society. We've been free trading with them for 25 or 30 years. They're essentially at economic war with us. They've deindustrialized the upper Midwest, taken all those high value added jobs, and that, quite frankly, that's Trump's massive program is to bring back and make North America, Mexico, United States, and Canada a geostrategic manufacturing counterweight to East Asia, so you can start to bring the supply chain back. That's what I think is going to make us a robust economy, a robust manufacturing economy. We can't do any of these service jobs. You have to become a manufacturing country again. I think you're starting to see it. I think that's where wages start to rise, healthcare start to come back, and I think that'll drive us in the future. But people that get on Trump all the time about these tariffs don't understand. It's not just about tariffs. What President Trump is trying to do is another tool in the toolbox to counter the economic war that China's got against us.
Well, you mentioned that too, and I know we're going to talk about Trumpet War eventually, but I'm reading the comments in real time, and people are just really blown away. And I think the reason they're blown away is nobody's ever actually had a free-ranging conversation with you like this, because the left is afraid of – here's what the left is afraid of. The left is afraid of rejecting all identity politics, including the Louis Farrakhan crew on the left. They're afraid of people talking about student loans because, as you know, Wall Street controls, and that's not a reference to any kind of ethnicity, because Henry Paulson was part of the bailouts too, and the Bush family and the Sauds and everything. But people are really afraid of the message that you're having, the conversation we're having. So the question I always like to ask people is, what's the question you've never been asked that you wish you had been asked?
That's great. I think you've asked the questions about nationalism. And here's, I think, why maybe people's heads are blowing up. Because when I give that pitch about economic nationalism, remember, I go on very little conservative media anymore because I'm trying to spread the message by taking on the toughest people at BBC or Channel 4 or CNN or MSNBC, because I'm trying to get this message out to those Bernie people, African Americans, and working class Hispanics that can be our allies. And they never put that part on there. They are scared to death of the basics of the Trump program. Listen, when they're attacking Trump for being a racist and a nativist and a xenophobe and all of that, they don't want to talk about the policies that drove those numbers on Friday. They say, oh, it's Obama. Obama did it. It's Obama's economy. Sense like this, right? They don't want to address the fact. And here's the reason. It's not Trump they're trying to shut up. It's your audience they're trying to shut up, Mike. It's the deplorables they're trying to shut up. They understand that real political power in this country comes from the grassroots, right? And I tell these guys to come in all the time and hire these lobbyists and walk around the Capitol Hill and knock on doors. And I said, hey, that's not power. Power's out there in Netroots Nation. Power is out there in the resistance. Power's out there in the Tea Party movement. Power's out there in the evangelical Christians. Power's out there in the NRA. The closer you get to the people in this country, that's where real political power comes from. And what the left is, and what they're freaked out about, they understand economic arguments of Donald Trump's populist economic nationalist program is going to start to attract African Americans and Hispanics. And that's why they got to pull the race card. That's why they have to pull the xenophobe card. That's why they have to push the nativist card. And so my belief is victory begets victory. We won in 2016. A magic wand didn't come over and said, hey, what a great idea. Let Trump and Cernovich and Bannon and all these deplorables, Stephen Miller, let all these guys just run the country, do what they want. No, they didn't do that. They came up with Russia and they started the nullification project to delegitimize Trump right away. You know why? They are scared to death of a guy that's an armor-piercing show that has the deplorables come up and back them that can take control of the country. So guess what? They won. They got one battle. They get a do-over. And Tuesday's the do-over. Okay? We have every source of power in this country to turn out on Tuesday. If the deplorables turn out, we will shut these folks down. Okay? They're showing the energy. And the reason is that they know Trump's transformative. Trump is a Kafka-esque novel for these people. Trump's going to be in their lives 20 years from now. Do you know what a nightmare that is, Mike? When you wake up on the left and you know Donald Trump is going to be in your personal life 20 and 30 years from now, That's why they're walking precincts. That's why they're knocking on doors. And everybody in your audience, we got to put the past battles aside. We can't talk about rhinos. We can't. Mitch McConnell, I'm the biggest anti-establishment guy. It's not the time for that discussion. It's like war. This is very focused. We turn it on Tuesday, we win. If we win, the project goes forward. If we lose the House, and I don't want to hear any nonsense about, oh, he can run against it in 2020. Listen, they're going to get a killing machine up on Trump on these investigations and try to field strip his administration. Jerry Nadler is going to run judiciary. He's already been bragging on CNN. He's going to have 52 investigations, right? Stephanopoulos today had their Capitol Hill reporter on the Stephanopoulos Sunday show, and she said, hey, the first thing they're going to do is start massive investigations against the White House. They fully intend to field strip the entire Trump administration, and that's what I'm saying. I believe in my heart, because I was there in November of 16, on the early morning of the night, it was divine providence that allowed us to win, but divine providence works through human agency. That means everybody's got to get to work. We got to stop leaning on our shovels. We got to stop whining and bickering. You got to get all your friends, everybody that supports the Trump program has got to get on Tuesday. And if we do that, we're going to win these 25 congressional districts, and we'll live to fight another day.
Well, I noticed the media has gone from predicting a blue wave to hedging and hedging and hedging, and they don't really know what's going to happen. So what's the internal? I know the internal numbers were really, the real polls were really bad before Kavanaugh. And then just myself, I sensed a major shift once they went after Kavanaugh, because it's one thing to say, well, you know, we'll go after these so-called fringe people, but Kavanaugh showed they'll go after anybody. What has been the data and the numbers inside shown?
I think so. So when I left the White House, and in September of 17, I met with some of the senior guys running the House campaigns. At that time, they thought it could be 80 to 100 seats. They anticipated that 2018 could be the reverse of the Tea Party year, right? When the Tea Party won 62 seats. Remember, as a rule of thumb, and I take 1994, the Gingrich Revolution, and the Tea Party revolt of 10. The rule of thumb is in the first midterm of a presidency, you should localize the election and focus on local candidates instead of nationalizing. I thought that was nonsense. This whole thing's going to be about Trump. He permeates the political culture. He permeates the pop culture. It was going to be about him. So I think the first thing was to nationalize this election and make sure people understand if you've got to go work in your district for a right for Trump's vote, and they're going to impeach him if they win. So I think first was the nationalized election, and you start to see those numbers come down, Mike. I think it was 60 in winter, early spring. It had to be 50. I went on Sean Hannity's show with 100 days ago, the 100th night, and I said, look, it's 35 to 40. I will tell you right now, we've stopped the blue wave. Unless things cut against us in the House on Tuesday, I think you're down talking to 25 to 30 seats gross with 4 or 5 potential pickups. So this thing's going to come down to a very intense fight. And that's why everybody is listening to your show tonight has got to understand this is fully in your power to change history right here. Because if we go out and cut those below 20, very possibly, these are all on a nice edge. If you go down and if you're living in a district, you're following local news, or you're going to Real Clear Politics, or you're following Breitbart or Cernovich, you know how tight these races are all across the country. It's all the way from Maine all the way up to New Mexico to Arizona to California. We got 25 or 30 of these that are real dogfights. And if, if half of these turn our way, because people have gotten out and we have a couple of pickups, and I think the weak point for the Democrats, they haven't focused. They were so greedy. They had such big eyes on how big a table run they could do on 50 or 60 seats. They took their eyes off what they had to hold. So right now, besides Pennsylvania 14, you got Minnesota 1, you got Minnesota 7, you got Minnesota 8, you got Nevada 3, Nevada 4, you got Arizona 1. You got 5 or 6 out there that looks like they could cut either way, pick up 3 or 4 seats, which will just kill the Democrats. Also, for your audience, please remember, these people have been promised Donald Trump's head on a pike, okay? They are not walking districts in Iowa in July in 90% heat and humidity to work with Donald Trump in January 2019 on prison reform. That's just not true. They are there to impeach him. He's not going to be removed from office, but they want the impeachment process to field strip the populist nationalist movement around Donald Trump. And so that is why if we hold that off and hold the House, because I think we're going to hold the Senate, pick up a couple. Well, if we hold the House, they're going to turn on each other. If you think the Civil War, Mike, that you've witnessed for the last 7, 8, 9 years of the anti-establishment group on the right and the Mitch McConnell, John Boehner establishment has been vicious on the right, the left is going to get out of control because these people are finally going to turn on the junta, the Wall Street junta led by the Clintons, that have basically debased the Democratic Party. If they don't get Trump's head in an impeachment process, they're going to turn, and I think it's going to lead to a massive potential landslide for Trump in 2020.
Yeah, one thing for the people listening, too, I don't think they appreciate is the impeachment stuff isn't going to take Trump down, but what it'll do is it'll bankrupt anybody who ever went near him. They'll just subpoena you left, right. You know, I know you and Roger Stone are always on the best terms, but you know, what they're doing to Roger is they just try to bleed you with these legal fees, and that's an issue that I don't think enough people appreciate.
Look, Mike, you've hit a big point, is that the White House, look at the White House staff. If you're in the White House staff, and if we lose the House on Tuesday, and they know this is what they're doing. This is why NADMA puts out the 52 things in the morning. If you want to go into the White House, one, you're going to make 150 to 175 max. You've got to go in with $1 million of cash just to pay the legal fees.
Right.
They know that they're going to subpoena you, right? Every action, every email, every text you ever sent is going to be under scrutiny, and they're going to try to grind the Trump administration into dust in these investigative processes. And that's without impeachment. That's aside from the what they do with the Mueller report. I'm just saying what NADMA's already said, hey, I got a law out there from like 1890. I can get his tax returns. They're going to go in to investigate conflicts of interest. They're going to investigate his business interests. I mean, they're open and brazen about it. And behind the scenes, they're talking about it all the time. That's why Nancy Pelosi wants to temper that talk. So she understands that's what riles up the deplorables and gets the Trump base out there. But ladies and gentlemen, don't think it'll be very difficult to staff the White House, given the fact that they're going to go after people and make their lives miserable and drive up massive legal fees.
Yeah, that's how they do it, and it is hard for people, just regular people, to get these jobs. But I don't know. One thing that I noticed is the people who are staffing personnel. I know a lot of good quality people got kept out of that White House. So a lot of these problems, I know you don't want to get into all that, but a lot of these problems are self-inflicted, man. Because I know people pristine, and they couldn't get in because the Johnny DeStefano and others in personnel wanted to keep them out.
Well, look, let's talk about that. Let's address that. Look, we won as a coalition. We pulled together with the establishment to win. It was principally the Trump base, but afterwards, and I think at the time it was prudent. The RNC did happen to put a lot of people in there, and these were quality people. And I don't think, if you go back and look at it, it wasn't really the problem at the beginning with this nationalist group, the guys and the globalists. The globalists are really the progressive Democrats. The big battles on immigration, the big battles on tariffs in China, in economics, were all really the progressive Democrats in the White House, not really the RNC guys. I agree with you. I think we did a very poor job of getting more Trump people in there. I think those opportunities are starting to be created. But if we win on Tuesday, it'll be sunlit upwards, right? Because then you'll be able to get people in the White House, you'll be able to restaff, things are going. If you lose on Tuesday, I just don't know how, the people I know that's associated generally with the campaign, how they're going to be able to personally afford it. Because I'm going to tell you, you're going to need $500,000 to $1 million. I mean, look at, Roger Stone and I, sometimes we're best friends, sometimes we're mortal enemies, but that's what they're trying to do with Ron, trying to lead him out the entire time, and that's the process. And that's how you be on the White House staff. If you're in the White House staff, you don't even know how many times these White House staff people have been called over, and you have to have these attorneys. So, look, it's what the left intends to do with these investigations. If you go back to the Kavanaugh hearing, what I say that drove, we nationalized elections for them, but I think Kavanaugh was an accelerant. I think it was an accelerant, Mike, in two ways. Number one, the way the Democrats comported themselves during the hearings, and then what happened afterwards. During the hearings, you saw how the senators comported themselves. That's going to be the House of Representatives every day. It was the House. If Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House, that kind of Moscow show trial is going to be what the Trump administration, on every aspect of it, on deregulation, on his national security policy, on the you're never going to get the wall. They're going to have appropriations power. Appropriations comes out of the House. You're not going to get the wall. And so this is the type of thing between the investigations and what they can shut down with appropriations. It's going to be living hell. And I think anybody else that says anything different is dangerously naive.
Real quick, can we do a rapid fire and have you hang up and call back in because you were cutting out a little bit, and to get wrap it.
Sure. I can call you. I'll call you.
The people can't get enough. They can't get enough of you. All right, we're gonna have Steve call right back in, and that's the background noise for all this stuff. I'll be right back.
Well, I've been sitting here all day.
All right, you back, Mr. Bannon?
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, much better. So I'll just take some rapid fire questions because, again, This is a testament to the problem with the fake news media. Nobody's ever actually heard you talk. So my first question, I guess, would be, why don't you have your own thing, your own podcast, your own media stuff?
What I've been doing is for the last 9 months, a year, trying to build this movement. I've got a C4. We started a war room. We've got the only 24-hour-a-day war room to back the president, to put talking points out. I've been spending time in Europe and then kind of building the thing here. All that kind of media stuff. People have approached me with 100 media opportunities. It's just I got to focus on one thing at a time. And this election right here, and then the parliamentary elections next year for the European parliamentary elections, has sucked up 90% of my time. But I might, it happen. People approach me all the time. I've thought about it. I just haven't pulled the trigger. It's to do it right, Mike, as you know, it's a massive time commitment. And right now I've just been, moving around the country, moving around the world to try to, put the infrastructure in place for this populist nationalism that sucked up, 150% of my time.
So yeah, what is next for nationalism? Then we know, not to get too esoteric, but I know you're a fan of the fourth turning, and I'm actually, had read that years ago, and I'm a fan of energy. And I believe that human beings, there's a hive mind, a collective sort of unconscious, and populism is only going to keep resurging. So where do you see the next populist movement happening?
Well, I think you're seeing it right now breaking out all over Europe. You saw Captain Bolsonaro. I know it shouldn't be lost to your listeners that Captain Bolsonaro in Brazil won on the same day that Angela Merkel lost her second big regional election and basically ended her political career. So I think the driving force of our time is populism. It all depends. And I do think we're in a fourth turning. I think we're in a fourth turning here in the United States. We had, this is about generational history. Generations are raised by others or other generations. You've had the American Revolution. You've had the Civil War. You've had the Great Depression, World War II. They happen about every 100 years, 80 or 100 years. And I think we're in the fourth turning right now. And I keep saying, and this is what I told the audience in Toronto, it's pretty evident to me that the future is going to be populist. We're going to get this anti-elitist mentality is now going throughout the world. And I can see it everywhere because I'm being contacted by everybody in Pakistan, in Japan, in South Korea, in India, in Brazil. You can see it starting to rise everywhere. The question I think we're going to have to answer is it going to be one of more freedom and liberty by deconstructing the administrative state and having, real entrepreneurial capitalism and a better piece of the action for the little guy as far as jobs and wages? Or is it going to be this populist socialism? And that's going to be more state intervention, kind of more globalist in its outlook. And I think much more identity politics. And I think that's the future. That's the battle. And one of the first battles of this thing was November. Brexit was won. 2016, the United States was second. You had the Italian elections, the Hungary elections, Orban. You have Salvini and Di Maio. You had Captain Bolsonaro, and now next, had these elections in Germany. And now on Tuesday we have, I think, President Trump's first reelect. I think what this thing is showing on this reelect of Trump, because essentially it is a reelect, I believe, is that I think the American presidency will still be in 4-year terms. But I think those terms are now going to be focused on 2-year increments, because I think the intensity of these midterm elections, I think, quite frankly, we're going to get 65 or 70% of the vote. And I think in a midterm after the 2020, I think that 2022 will be at the same level as a presidential year. I think we're heading that direction of the intensity. And so, this is going to continue on, and people are going to, look, to continue to win, you're going to have to stay engaged. I would love to sit there and say, because I know most people on the right, Mike, have full lives, and they coach Little League, they play golf, they have hobbies. They're not absorbed with politics like people on the left. Unfortunately, we live in a time, we live in an age when this requires everybody to the ramparts. You're going to have to give up certain hobbies. You're going to have to give up certain things. This is going to have to become part of your life, not just listening to your podcast, but taking the actionable items you talk about. And if we continue to drive a grassroots movement of working class people and middle class people, we're going to win. Victory begets victory, but it's going to be who works the hardest. And that's why I think I couldn't be happier in doing what I'm doing, and I couldn't be happier living in this time in history.
Well, actually, and a lot of people too are going to have to risk. Like when I do an event, and I know when you do an event, it's literally you're risking your life. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about this. I know that I was younger, I always thought, I wonder what it was like to be, you know, Benjamin Franklin or somebody. And I'm like, well, now I know, and I'm not sure I like it. So how do you feel about that?
Well, listen, here's one thing I would tell people. I know, you know, most of your listeners and most people on the right are devour history. And I tell people, I know you read about the revolution and said, hey, if I was during the revolution, I would be with the rebels. Well, the reality is the country then was about 1/3 rebels, you know, 1/3 patriots, 1/3 Tories, and 1/3 were people in the middle. See how this thing played out, right? You know, you had the Civil War, then you had World War II, and people always said, hey, if I lived in those times, I would be up there. And listen, we're living in historic times. They're going to look back at us 100 years from now, and we're going to come through this kind of fourth turning, and we're going to be one thing or the other. We're either going to be the country that was bequeathed to us and the country that Donald Trump said, I'm not going to let the elites manage America to decline. I'm going to step in here and assist these deplorables to make America great again, to return America to her former glory, okay, with the shoulder to shoulder with working class people. We're at a moment in history. And by the way, we'll be one thing or the other. We'll either be this kind of cultural Marxist, democratic socialist entity, or we'll be the United States of America was bequeathed to us. And what I would hope everybody in your audience thinks that 100 years from now, when they look back at us, they will say, hey, these are the patriots at that time that put their shoulder to the wheel and took the heat. You know, I travel with security today, and I don't whine about it. It just is what it is. I was quoted in the New York Times the other day about Soros. And I said, look, the reason they go after Soros, not because he's Jewish, they go after Soros because he's effective. Right. And that's the admissions ticket for being effective. And by the way, I hope one day to be as effective as Soros, and I hope to be as vilified as Soros, because that's just the admission price. And if you whine about it, you know, you're in the wrong game. You should go do something else. But it's intense. And I think that intensity shows you what the high stakes are.
3 books everyone should read.
3 books everybody should read. I think you should definitely read The Fourth Turning, right? I also think people should go back, which I try to do every day, and read the Gospels and read them as whole entities, right? As individual entities, and read what Mark had to say, and read how Jesus is portrayed in Mark, read how he's portrayed in John, read how he's portrayed in Matthew, and try to take those lessons. I think The Fourth Turning is definitely one people should read. And if I had to pick a one for right now, I would say. I think what I would do is go back and read Mackinder's. There's a book on geopolitics by Sir Harold Mackinder, written at the turn of the 20th century, about the basic geography and geopolitics. And I think that will get you a very good understanding of kind of the basis of what's happening on the Eurasian landmass and what's really going to drive a lot of this 21st century, which is this great hegemonic war between the totalitarian Confucius mercantilist society of the Chinese regime of the Communist Party and kind of the liberal democracy handed down from Athens to Jerusalem to Rome to London to the United States. That's really the what I call the Judeo-Christian West. Those two systems, I think, are in conflict. And it would be played out over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so I would recommend Mackinder's Geopolitics, the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and by the way, I'd read the King James version of the Gospels. Although I'm a Catholic, I recommend the King James version for its literature. And then the Fourth Turning. The one other thing I would recommend is Plutarch's Lives of Noble Romans and Greeks. I think you get a great understanding of people under pressure and leaders that had to make decisions. And I think it will expand everybody's horizon. So you read those 3 or 4 books, I think you'll be in good stead. I got
another great question, which is, what's the most bang for your buck thing the involved mom, the involved dad, the involved person who isn't a paid protester can do, not just Tuesday, but going forward?
I think going forward, I think this is a great question. I think it's find a group, whether it's Tea Party Patriots, whether it's Freedom Works, whether it's our group, Citizens of the American Republic, CORE. Pick a group, pick a local Tea Party group, pick some group. And get engaged. And what I mean, get engaged online. Help to push out their materials. If they have meetings, go to meetings. Do teletown halls. All you need is your engagement, right? What this movement's got to be, it's got to be a citizen-based movement. It doesn't matter how much money the donors put in. It doesn't matter for the TV advertising. At the end of the day, we know the gold standard. Obama showed us this in 08. The Tea Party showed us this in 10. Trump showed us this in 16. And we're going to see this tomorrow, whether the left wins or the Trump movement on Tuesday, the November 6th of 2018, that at the end of the day, it's human contact and grassroots. And so I think two things to do: continue to listen to shows like this and get as much information. And I would actually say broaden your scope on the information. You should go to the Financial Times of London. I recommend that everybody in your audience every day read The Guardian. Now, The Guardian is the most progressive left-wing paper out there, but it's terrifically edited and well-written. You'll disagree with the ideology, but it'll give you the perspective of other people and how they think about us. Broaden your perspective. Get more information. Do not narrowcast yourself in information. Make sure you go to Breitbart, you go to Daily Caller, you go to Gateway Pundit, you go to all those great sites, but also broaden it by starting to look at other sites also. Get more information, question everything, and then get engaged. And you can get engaged at any age, and you can get engaged at any distance. The internet today has disintermediated so much of the old systems, and so you can get engaged. And if you get engaged with these groups, and there's tons of these not-for-profits out there that are trying to, whether it's in immigration, pick what your love is. Pick the thing that moves you. Is it immigration? Is it national security? Is it the military? Is it the southern border? Is it the populist movement? Just pick what interests you. Look at what news sites you go to. Look at the stories you read all the time. Find out who the think tanks are, who the not-for-profits are. Just go and volunteer and maybe go to a conference, etc. It will literally change your life. It'll open up perspectives. You'll meet friends. You'll meet people that have common acquaintances. It'll really become not just a hobby. It'll become part of the fabric of your life. And so I recommend everybody to get engaged that way.
Yeah, that's why they try to shut down the events. Community is the biggest event. There was even a threat of the shooting. So another thing we haven't heard Trump talk about is when people try to meet, there are a lot of threats. And I don't know, I know you like Jeff a lot, but Jeff Sessions doesn't really seem to be doing anything about that. So if they're listening in, there are Trump supporters that want to meet in public, but there is a real threat that they will face left-wing domestic terrorism.
Well, listen, I think sometime next year we're going to, with CORE and some other groups, we're going to set up either at CPAC or around CPAC. We have to get more organized, and we have to do more events locally. I know CPAC's out in, I think, Kansas last week. We are going to start going out and doing regional things. People have to be able to come together, and we're going to have, if we have to get security for it, we'll get security for it, but they can't. The one thing I like about our side, Mike, it's got the grit and determination not to back down from anybody, right? It's threats. And that's one of the things I admire about the people in Toronto. They were under tremendous pressure the other night to shut this thing down, but they pulled it off as a quite liberal audience. I got hooted as much as I got applause. Every time I tried to defend President Trump, they were in orange man bad mode. But I thought they listened, and I thought they appreciated this debate about populism, nationalism. So I think it's imperative for our people to be able to gather, and hopefully 2019 we'll have a number of events throughout the country to get people together.
Well, yeah, one thing I noticed that you did in the media, again, they're so dishonest, is friends of mine who attended your New York event, your event was well attended, and then you hit these kind of down market areas, and they'll say, oh, only 20 people showed up, and it's like, well, yeah, it's a small town. There's not that many people showing up. So I'm glad that you did that and you took the media.
Well, but here's look, you can't. The media's not going to give you a fair break. You don't ask for it from it. When I go out and do these films, I do them to audiences. Sometimes to show them. Other times it's just to meet. What they caught was just meeting with grassroots leaders. When we went to Staten Island, the reason we went there was a very contentious primary where a guy was running against the guy that won it is kind of a rhino. There's a lot of people that are Trump supporters that have bitter feelings from the primary. It doesn't matter. He's in a very tough race with a very attractive Democratic candidate, and we have to win that seat. There's a heavy Republican seat. We went there to talk to grassroots leaders. If there's 35 people there, that's fine. I do this in living rooms with 15 people. The key is, and you can see in Arizona 1, New Mexico 2, Pete Sessions District, I had 10 events in Sessions District. 2 were big screens of the film with over 100 people, and some of them were as small as 10 people in a prayer session, but they were leaders that would go out. So I'm there to meet both grassroots leaders, whether that's a crowd of 15 or 20 to inspire them, or it's a couple of hundred. It doesn't matter. I'm there to get this message out, to say promulgate the message that is in your power to do it. And listen, here's the reason mainstream media, didn't cover the one in Buffalo. I didn't want to, or the one in in New York that were packed, and these other ones that were packed, is they want to sit there and go, oh, this movement's losing juice. They hope it's losing juice. It's at the top of the first inning, and we get stronger every day. And the way we're going to get stronger is just keep grinding it out. Don't listen to the mainstream media. Let them do their own thing. They're always going to heckle you, and you got to just be impervious to it. If you're in this and going to get your feelings, if you're a precious flower, don't sign up, because they're there to try to destroy you and crack and rip your soul out. Right? You've got to be impervious. You almost have to be a honey badger. You just have to say, I don't give a fuck. Right? I'm just putting my head down and I'm going to get it done. So you can't be a precious flower in this business. You just got to get a tough shell. And that's one of the reasons I love the deplorables all around the country. Every person I talked to said, we absolutely understand what has to happen. We understand what we have to do to support President Trump. Let's just get on with it.
Well, thank you. And we would love to keep you more, but you do have a talk with some veterans. So we don't want to keep you from our great veterans organizations. I thank you for everything. I hope you do write a book that can be, I like that your message is more aspirational than a lot of what I hear from conservatism. Oh, let's own the libs. Let's do this. Oh, let's cut taxes 3%. That Peter Thiel really did nail it in 0 to 1, where he said, if you talk about big ideas in the 50s, you were a visionary, and today you sound like a weirdo, and we need more of that 0 to 1 thinking.
Mike, thank you so much. Love the show, and I'd love to do it again. But yeah, I got to jump to a couple more radio things. So thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the audience.
Trumpetwar.com. Go watch it. Oh, they can share the video. If they like it, they can upload it and everything. So, well, there you go. You just heard from Steve Bannon. Here, let me see if I can shut this off here without, I think we're good here. I'm trying to, yep. Hold on, people. I'll get this audio thing set up here. We had a brand new setup tech-wise, so just give me...
Well, I've been sitting here all day. I've been sitting in this waiting room.
You just heard from Steve Bannon. What did you think? Did you enjoy the interview? What are your thoughts? What are your comments? I haven't been able to read your comments on YouTube and some of the other channels. And let's get your feedback. What did you think about that interview with Stephen Bannon that we just had? A lot of people I noticed in the comments were saying that, oh, wow, like I never heard this, or I never heard that point, or I never heard that point. And that is, again, the victimization of the fake news, where they want you in a soundbite. Will the media report that Bannon specifically said the attack on the Tree of Life was terrorism? No, they're not going to report on that. They're not going to report on discussion of student loan reform unions. They're not going to talk about how he's a civic nationalist and he rejects all ethno-nationalism. They're not going to talk about the pro-Israels. They're not going to talk about any of that. They're going to say Bannon goes on Pizzagate pod. If they report on it at all, that's what they'll say. They'll go, Bannon went on Pizzagate podcast. Did you know Cernovich is a bad guy? Da-da-da. But the flip side to that is that's why the media, they're losing, because people are so bored with that. They're so like, oh God, another one of these. Okay, another dumb article on it. And that is, again, they can't compete in the free market of ideas. They don't have anything to say. By the way, if you're on YouTube, be sure to like this video and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn the notifications on. If you're on Periscope, tap the screen. And if you're on YouTube, like and share it. And by the way, if you did enjoy this interview, you may download the interview in full and upload it to your YouTube channel. So if you have a YouTube channel, a Facebook page, go ahead and upload the full thing and to your pages. Now, people are going to try to do choppy edits and fake edits. None of that's allowed. But people who do want to do a full upload, you're welcome when it's over to download it and do the full upload. If there's one specific, 3-4 minute segment you like, that's really what it's about, because we need to get the message out. So people are saying it's informative. They liked it. Yeah, there isn't anybody who is having it. So somebody goes, if you talk about student loans. Yeah, we talked about student loans. We talked about this is visionary thinking. This is the opposite of what you see on the fake news media. By the way, this is how long been going? An hour? My poor friend here is helping out. I feel bad. He's been here all day, but I didn't want any tech issues to happen. So you just go for an hour. This is the way people who are positive and upbeat and everything go. And the fake news media, that's why they can't compete. No commercial breaks, no stops, no edits. They're not intellectuals. The fake news media, they don't read books. They don't do book recommendations. They aren't intelligent. And they waver. They fold. They can't hang. That's why they have to edit. That's why they have to go to their their little playbooks and everything like that. So yeah, if you're on Facebook, like this video, share this video widely, get the word out. If you're on YouTube, again, like and subscribe to the video. Thank you everybody for watching. Unless you have any specific questions, I think we're good to go. I think that was a good interview. I think it was productive. We'll see, we'll see if the fake news media actually covers it, if they don't. But by the way, Trump at war. So he was actually here to promote a film. But that's the way it is with me. So trumpatwar.com. That's where you have to go after you finish watching this stream. You have to go to trumpatwar.com, or you can watch the video in full on my Facebook. You can watch trumpatwar.com. People have it on YouTube. They have it everywhere. But that's when we close this, don't go back to Twitter. Don't go back to anywhere, because he technically was here to promote the movie and everything else. So trumpatwar.com is